They don't go for so like that. And within the university system, no, I must place the union in proper pathway for people to understand.
Hello and welcome to the program. Now, in probably a couple of months to come, this document that I'm holding here, that's the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, would no longer be the same. Quite a number of clauses would be inserted in the document. The amendment process is already on, and in fact, the National Assembly, that is the Senate and the House of Representatives, is almost done with its own portion of work in the lengthy amendment process. The Senate has adopted 30 of the 33 amendments proposed by the lawmakers. Senate President Bukola Saraki says the exercise will be the first time ever that the National Assembly will conclude the process of constitutional amendment long before an election year so that people can objectively participate in the process without looking at the partisan benefits. Now, that is quite true to some extent because it's debatable if indeed every lawmaker participated in the process without considering partisan benefits. Now, let's take you through some of the major clauses adopted and rejected by the Senate. And let me put this aside for now. First, of course, let's look at those. The first is on the membership of the Council of State. And of course, members, the amendments was proposed actually to make former President of the Senate and Speakers of the House of Representatives of the influential to make them now members of the influential National Council of State. It was unanimously adopted by the senators, of course, and that was adopted also by the House of Representatives. Of course, the House of Representatives put in a caveat saying that Senate presidents that had been impeached or House speakers of the House of Representatives now that had been impeached would not be part of the National Council of State. Then that on devolution of powers rejected by both the Senate and, of course, the House of Representatives. Then we talk about financial autonomy for a legislature. And now that was adopted by the senators. Of course, Senate approved the amendment that will see state legislators superintend over their own budget rather than the existing practice that gives governors powers to appropriate expenses of the state lawmakers. Now, that was, of course, adopted by the Senate and, of course, by the House of Reps. Now, special accounts for local government area adopted. This was adopted by the Senate, of course. The proposal wants to give local government administrators the opportunity now. The law will empower them to manage their own accounts as against the existing policy in which governors exert powers over allocation to local government areas. So this section now, if amended, will allow separate accounts for local governments from states with councils receive. Separate accounts now for local governments from states with councils receiving monthly federal allocations directly, because the current practice is that the current federal allocation that goes to local government areas, actually that allocation doesn't go to them directly. It goes to a joint account, and that joint account, of course, between the local government and the state, and then the governors actually have enormous influence over that account. But now this was adopted by the Senate. Now, democratic existence, funding, and tenure of local government councils also adopted. And of course, basically recognizing local government councils as a third tier of government, and then, abolishing this whole idea of caretaker leadership that is so common in local government council. So that was, of course, adopted by the Senate. And, of course, state creation and boundary adjustments actually rejected by both the Senate and, of course, the House of Representatives. The amendment was rejected with a narrow vote of 48 to 47 in the Senate. Senators, of course, rejecting the amendment to Section 8 of the Constitution that would have allowed only democratically elected local government councils to participate in state creation and adjustment of boundaries. Now, the Land Use Act that was rejected, the proposal was to remove the Land Use Act, of course, in the Constitution, but eventually rejected both in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Presidential assent, this was adopted in the Senate, but of course, something happened in the House of Representatives. The House of Reps did not adopt that. Now, the proposal basically seeks to make any bill that is passed by the National Assembly automatically become law if the executive fails to reject or veto or sign it into law after 30 days of transferring same to the president. Actually, that was passed by the Senate. Now, time frame for submission of ministerial nominees. This was adopted by both the Senate and, of course, the House of Representatives, saying that the president must submit the name of his ministerial nominees 30 days after being sworn in as the president. And then this other, number 10, the submission of ministerial nominees with their portfolios, that was adopted, that these nominees must always come with their portfolios to the Senate. So if, for instance, the president was appointing any minister at all, the senators must know the portfolio the ministerial nominee would be taking up, so that they would be able to question the minister along that line. The practice before now, or which is still the practice anyway, until the amendment sails through, is that the president basically appoints ministers without assigning them portfolios. So the nominees simply go for ministerial screening without actually knowing what ministries actually they'll be heading. And then the 35% affirmative action for women, this was rejected by the Senate, but of course approved by the House of Representatives. Now let's take you through the areas of disagreement now between the Senate and the House of Reps, where they didn't vote. The Senate voted differently from the House of Reps. First is the 35% affirmation action for women as ministers. It was passed by the House of Representatives, but of course rejected by the Senate. Citizenship and indigenship was passed by the Senate, but it was rejected by the House of Representatives. Just a brief explanation on this. If these had been passed, it would have enabled married women who are now married to husbands now from a different state from their own state to actually claim indigenship and actually run or get appointed on the basis of their marriage. But in this case, it was rejected by the House of Reps. But of course, it was passed by the Senate. Now, change of names of some local government areas, that was passed by the Senate, but it was rejected by the House of Reps. Appointment of Minister of FCT, that of course was passed by the Senate, but of course rejected by the House of Representatives. Now, removal of lawmaking power from executive arms as regards NYSC, it was passed by the Senate, but of course rejected by the House of Reps. Removal of lawmaking power now from executive arms as regards National Security Agencies Act, that was passed by the Senate, but rejected by the House of Reps. And then the removal of lawmaking powers now from the executive arms as regards National Complaints Commission, that's the Public Complaints Commission. It was passed by the Senate, but rejected by the House of Representatives. Now, removal of lawmaking power from the executive arm as regards the Land Use Act, because the Land Use Act, that was passed by the Senate, but it was rejected by the Reps. Now, the deletion of State Independent Electoral Commission from the Constitution, that was passed by the Senate, but it was actually rejected by the House of Representatives. Now, the question is, what exactly happens to these areas where you have disagreements? I'll have a former senator join me after the break to talk about that. So don't go away, continue to stay with us. Every day, every hour, and every minute, news break in Nigeria. Things happen so fast, it's most times difficult to track and comprehend them. But that's what we do right here on DEJI360. 2015, would you want to come back again?
It's like asking Jesus Christ if he knew he was going to die, will you want to come back as the savior of the world again?
We do not just help you track the stories, we break them down, explore all the angles, analyze the issues so that you can fully comprehend the stories and use them to make the right decisions.